The clock read 12:14 a.m., its second hand trembling as if aware of the weight it carried. Deep beneath the forests outside Moscow, in a bunker carved from concrete and steel, silence reigned. A silence that could have been mistaken for calm. Then it was shattered. A shrill alarm pierced the darkness. Red lights bathed the control room in a hellish glow. Printers whirred violently, spitting sheets that operators barely had time to glance at. Across the screens, a single phrase blinked in ominous red letters. Missile launch detected. Not one, not two, five. 5 American intercontinental ballistic missiles were apparently streaking toward the Soviet Union. In that moment, the entire world condensed into one man, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov. His eyes locked on the screens. Every muscle in his body tensed. His training screamed at him to pick up the phone and alert his superiors, alert them that nuclear war had begun. Protocol dictated that hesitation could mean annihilation, but his instincts, honed through years of experience, whispered caution. Something was off. The Cold War had already pushed the world to the edge. Only 3 weeks earlier, Soviet forces had shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007, killing 269 civilians, including a sitting U.S. congressman. The outrage that followed had poisoned any remaining trust between the superpowers. The fear of a preemptive strike, of being caught unprepared, hung over the Soviet Union like a storm cloud. One false alarm could ignite the entire planet. One missed signal could leave the country defenseless. And in that bunker, Petrov alone had 6 minutes to decide which it was. Outside, the forests were silent. Inside, the bunker vibrated with tension. The Oko satellite, the Soviet Union's cutting-edge early warning network, had detected 5 missile launches within minutes. The system had been designed to prevent a surprise attack from obliterating the USSR. It was supposed to be infallible, but that night it was screaming wrong. Petrov leaned forward, scanning the readouts, trying to reconcile logic with protocol. 5 missiles? That didn't make sense. A real American first strike wouldn't be so limited. Its purpose would be total annihilation. Hundreds, maybe thousands of warheads aimed at silos, command centers, cities. 5 missiles could not accomplish that. Minutes passed. Petrov's breathing was steady, though inside he felt as though his heart had been replaced with a drum pounding out a warning. Each operator in the room waited for him to act. The weight of the world pressed down on his shoulders, though none outside would ever know. Outside, cities slept. Inside, Petrov wrestled with uncertainty, knowing that computers and satellites could be wrong, that human judgment was the last safeguard between civilization and its end. The alarm screamed again, louder this time. Lights pulsed red across the control panels. Printers continued to churn. Petrov's fingers hovered over the phone that could summon a response that might obliterate the United States. Every second felt like a minute. Every minute felt like an hour. His mind raced through what-ifs, probabilities, worst-case scenarios. He thought of Moscow, Leningrad, Kiev, and all the Soviet cities that would vanish if he reported the alert as real. Petrov's gaze flicked to the radar screen. The satellites had detected the infrared signatures, the telltale heat trails of missile launches, but ground radar had not yet confirmed them. In theory, the missiles were already airborne. In reality, it would take several minutes for radar to detect them over the horizon. That small window, mere minutes, was all that separated judgment from catastrophe. He asked himself the simplest of questions. Does this make strategic sense? The logic gnawed at him. A nuclear strike launched by the United States would not consist of 5 missiles. 5 missiles would never threaten the USSR's retaliatory capability. The computers insisted the attack was real, but the numbers defied reason. Petrov realized that the system was new, untested in real combat, still vulnerable to errors no engineer had anticipated. His gut told him something crucial. This could be a false alarm. For 6 minutes, Petrov waited. The bunker was alive with tension, but no one spoke. The sirens screamed, the lights pulsed, operators held their breath. He knew that in a few more minutes, radar might confirm or deny the threat, but every second brought unbearable risk. If he delayed too long and the attack was real, his hesitation could trigger the deaths of millions. If he acted on a false alarm, he might end humanity. Finally, he made his decision. Against the roar of alarms and the blinking of warning lights, Petrov reported that the attack was a false alarm. The room held its collective breath. Seconds crawled by. The radar screens continued to show nothing. Slowly, the panic ebbed. There were no missiles, no explosions, no firestorms. Humanity had been spared. The truth emerged later. High-altitude clouds over the United States had reflected sunlight in just the wrong way. The Oko satellites, scanning the Earth for the infrared signature of missile launches, had misinterpreted the reflected sunlight as a nuclear attack. A combination of cloud altitude, angle, and light had tricked the supposedly infallible system. The computers had been wrong. Petrov was right. Had he followed protocol without question, had he reported the attack as real, the Soviet Union might have unleashed its entire nuclear arsenal. The United States would have responded in kind. Hundreds of cities would have burned within hours. Millions would have perished in fire, radiation, and panic. And the planet could have faced a nuclear winter, the collapse of agriculture, and a chain reaction that would threaten human civilization itself. Yet history often overlooks the quiet heroes. Petrov's gamble was not celebrated at the time. In fact, he was criticized for failing to properly document the incident, a bureaucratic slap for a man who had just saved the world. He continued his career, eventually leaving the military, largely unrecognized. It wasn't until the 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, that the story emerged. Historians and military analysts were stunned. Humanity had been saved not by generals, politicians, or weapons, but by one man questioning a machine in a dimly lit room. The Cold War taught the world that destruction was always just minutes away. That night, the lesson became painfully real. The fragility of civilization depended not on treaties, not on deterrence, not on armored bunkers or satellites, but on the judgment of a single human being in a dimly lit room. Petrov himself refused the title of hero. He simply said, "People shouldn't start wars over computers," reflecting the gravity of a night when 6 minutes determined whether humanity would continue or end. On September 26, 1983, the world unknowingly teetered on the edge of apocalypse. Nuclear fire was a breath away. Cities could have vanished. Millions of lives could have ended, all because a machine misread a reflection of the sun on a cloud, and one human being chose to trust his reasoning over blind protocol. For 6 minutes, the fate of the planet hung by a thread, and then the thread held. The story of that night reminds us that peace is fragile, that humanity is always at the mercy of our own creations, and that sometimes the difference between survival and extinction is not the strength of our weapons, but the courage of a single person willing to make a judgment against the tide of fear. In the end, history turned on something almost inconceivably small. 6 minutes, one man, and the quiet defiance of logic over panic.